Hello, everyone. We are live, and I am with Victor today. And today we are talking about Crossplane. So, please, hello, how are you, Victor? And please introduce yourself plus Crossplane.
My, okay, plus crossplane, huh? I thought it's you're going to explain crossplane. That I'm just watching.
Oh,
Okay.
let me just. I try to. I try to. I know he's doing. I know he's doing so many different things, so it's difficult to explain in a very few words. But I try to say is cross plane is a control plane acting with control planes, or we can call it rise above the cloud.
There you go. There you go. That's all you need to know. Thank you so much for watching.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so a bit more serious, slightly more serious. I will not be serious, but slightly more serious. Yes, my name is Victor. I'm a developer advocate on Upbound. I have a YouTube channel, podcast. I don't know. I do random stuff, and then part of the random stuff I do ends up being somehow, maybe, occasionally useful. And since I'm working with Upbound, my main focus is Crossplane. And Crossplane is, let me think, how can I explain it? It's, as I said, it's many things, right? So probably the best way to explain Crossplane is through somehow layers, right? The lowest layer would be Crossplane itself, which is some sort of an engine that can be extended with providers. And providers are a way how to create custom resources in Kubernetes, to extend Kubernetes with custom resources that reflect some other resources. This sounds philosophical now, but let's say that you install AWS provider. And AWS itself has around 700 or 800 services, right? So when you install AWS provider in Crossplane, you get the same number of resources so that you can manage your stuff. In this case, AWS, but it could be anything else, literally anything, through Kubernetes, right? So you can create a CRD resource. Sorry, you can create the EC2 resource, and if you do that in Kubernetes, then from there on, Crossplane will manage your EC2 instance or RDS database or EKS cluster. And it doesn't have to be AWS. It can be Google Cloud. It could be Equinix Metal. It could be Azure. It could be applications. It could be almost anything, right? And the reason behind all that, so actually, let me, as you see, I'm not prepared. I'm just kind of speaking from top of my head. But let's think of it this way, right? Almost everybody is now in one capacity or another using Kubernetes, right? And if you ask people, why do you use Kubernetes, they will give you different answers. Some people will say, hey, because it's fault tolerant. Another person will say, because I can spread my applications across the cluster and let Kubernetes manage those applications. Whatever happens, Kubernetes will figure out where to put it, how to put it, why to put it, what happens if it goes down, how to restart it, and so on and so forth. So Kubernetes does scheduling, among other things. And now, when you think about it, if you say this is a good thing, it's a great idea to have Kubernetes manage my containers, then you can ask yourself, why containers? If scheduling is good, if API is amazing, if control plane of Kubernetes is a great thing, and so on and so forth, whatever reasons you might be having, my question would be, and why is that good only for containers running in your clusters? Why not apply the same logic? Whatever you like, kind of, whatever is the reason why you adopted Kubernetes, I can say, hey, maybe that same reason is applicable to other things. If it's good for containers, why wouldn't it be good to manage your Lambda functions? Why not your databases? Why not your infrastructure, services, and so on and so forth? So what we are trying to do with Crossplane is to extend Kubernetes so that you can use Kubernetes and all the things you love for much bigger scope of things than containers. And that's where providers come in. That's why there are resources for everything in AWS, Azure, DigitalOcean, whatever you're using, right? I mean, or there will be if there isn't today, right? So that's kind of a first layer. Crossplane allows you to manage stuff, whatever the stuff is. Doesn't matter where it is, doesn't matter what it is, using Kubernetes API, Kubernetes scheduler, Kubernetes this or that. And now comes the more interesting layer, and that's that Crossplane allows you to create your own custom resources. And that's extremely important because when you think about it, let's say an application in Kubernetes, right? What is an application in Kubernetes? For you, Saim, because you're familiar with Kubernetes, your answer would be, well, application in Kubernetes is when you get a deployment and you get ingress and you get service and you get Istio and you get this and you get that and so on and so forth. You have something that acts as an application, right? But for majority of other people who are not focused exclusively on Kubernetes, that is just too complicated, right? Kind of like, who is going to find me a Node.js developer or Python developer or Java developer or whatever and say, you need to write those 5,000 lines of YAML and your application will be running in Kubernetes. That's just silly. So what we're trying to do is we have something called compositions that allow you to define what does it mean for you, for people in your company to have something. And that something can be a backend application, a front-end application, a cluster, a database. So you can create a composition that says, hey, here is the YAML, here is a new resource with only the things that matter to you. And behind the scenes, I, as an expert in something, will make sure that that something that is easy for you becomes all the things that we need. Like EKS cluster in AWS, you need EKS cluster, node group, subnets, VPC, blah, 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 blah. You go crazy until you figure out everything you need. So it allows SREs or SREs or ops people or security people or whatever your specialty is to create services that others can consume. So that instead of others sending you an email saying, Saim, I need a cluster. And then you say, yeah, okay, cool, kind of, I'm busy right now, but I'll give it to you next week. You can respond with, no, you can do it yourself. You don't need me. I created a service that will allow you to create a cluster, deploy application, do whatever in a way that is specific to our company. And this is important, right? It's not that people in Crossplane say what it means to have something. It's kind of you are a designer of that something. So in certain way, you can say that Crossplane is not a platform that you should use. It is a tool that enables you to create a platform for the rest of the people in your company. I just realized that I spoke too much. I even forgot the question, but does that make sense so far?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the power thing, like I think you spoke about in the, like I heard this term for you. Like in the Kubernetes, we have a control plane, and every cloud has its own control plane. And that is, we never know that it's a control plane sitting behind the APIs in the cloud who doesn't know about it. And that's control plane is to synchronize the state. Like I want this machine, and it's your job to create a machine. Like you want to take a drift detection, like the stuff is already is in my YAML, and make the actual state to desired state. And that's what I think the most. And we know, like in the Kubernetes, like we have in Azure has its own APIs, GCP has its own APIs, AWS has its own API, and we need a universal control plane who can talk, interact with these control plane in the cloud. And you always tell people about Kubernetes is not just for deployment of the container; it's a universal API. And tell us about like uh, why this concept is so important, and you using the Crossplane on top of Kubernetes and all the feature and ecosystem that Kubernetes is using, you are leveraging those. That is another good, I think, good way of thinking about it.
Yes. So that would be maybe third layer or second and a half layer. I'm not sure. But so think of it this way, right? Almost everybody today is consuming services from multiple places, multiple clouds, or whatever you want to call it, right? Because your company might be running things in on-prem and something in AWS, and you might be having your data in Datadog, right? Or your application's code might be in GitHub, right? All those things are different clouds, different services, whatever you want to call it, right? And almost everybody, when I tell people you're a multi-cloud, people say, no, I'm not multi-cloud. I have everything in AWS. Not true, because GitHub is cloud. Do you have repository in GitHub? Yeah, or GitLab? Yes. Okay, so that's already two. Do you use Elastic Cloud or HashiVault? Yeah, that's three. Kind of. So everybody has, almost every company has services in multiple places from multiple vendors. Now, as you mentioned, each of those have an API and have a control plane. Great. And that control plane is making sure that whatever you do in AWS works somehow, and whatever you do in, in GitHub works. But the problem is, how do you manage all that, right? Because all of those have different APIs. So, and different control planes, and different this and different that. So eventually you go crazy, because AWS has nothing to do with Google Cloud, which has nothing to do with Azure, which has nothing to do with Linode, and nothing to do with GitHub. They're all different base or different APIs to manage stuff. So what we're trying to do is give you what you mentioned, some kind of universal API. Now, there is a complexity. Things are complicated and complex, and we need to deal with that somehow. But that does not mean that everybody in your company should be having to go through the same madness, right? So our idea is, hey, how about we put a layer that allows you to create that API for everybody in your company and says, hey, yes, we use different things from different places, but for you as a developer, tester, but whatever you are, kind of, this is the place, this is the API that you need to consume, that you need to interact with, that when you need something, whatever that something is, when you want to change something, when you want to remove something. And then below that API, there is a control plane. I call it control plane of control planes, that is then figuring it out. Okay, so Saim said that he wants this. What should I do? Okay, and then it starts figuring out the process. Oh, I should do this over here. Yeah, I should do this over there. And once those two things are finished, then I should go here. It's figuring out. So think of it as, let me think, what would be the analogy? Conductor of the orchestra, right? Imagine that each player in an orchestra is a different service, different instrument, violin or trombone or whatever, and then you have a conductor. That's the one that says, and now you. No, you shut up. You shut up. Kind of like, no, it's not your turn. Now you do something, and now the two of you. So it's similar to a conductor that is making sure that all those things are happening wherever they should be happening, right? So control plane of control planes, universal API. I'm half inventing the terms, but something in that direction.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think the really thing that when I go to the crossplane.io, I think the one thing really shines me on that day when I look at the feature. Like, we're using Terraform, Pulumi very a lot. I use Terraform for a very long time. But those are the infrastructure creation tool, and then don't see what happening after when something is running on the cloud. And when I first look at some of the demos on your channel and some of the us on the Crossplane team, so I think that really shines me. Like when you have a cluster up and running, it's doing very good stuff. And somebody initially go to the console and somehow it's delete the cluster. And right now it's not there. And the Crossplane detects that your actual state drift from your desired state is drift from what is actually in the actual state. So it detects those and it makes synchronization and apply the fixes and everything back to the normal. So I'm dreaming about this tool for a very long time when I first joined some of the companies and
Yeah, it's
GitOps role because and you need to sit down and think me. That's the point. Like when the control when you have drift and actual desired state make the apply fixing and everything works hard to make things back to the normal. So that is one of the core features that I really like about it. Do you have some examples on the GitHub repository that people want to know where should we start learning about the Crossplane? You can share with the people as well.
yeah, but they should learn. I mean, Crossplane IO. That's where documentation is. Upbound IO is where company documentation is. So Crossplane is an open source project. It's CNCF member, and then there is Upbound where I work. We are dedicated to Crossplane. My YouTube channel. Yeah. Never forget that
Yes,
one.
absolutely.
Also, I publish stuff. So this is kind of weird situation. I published quite a few things about Crossplane on my channel,
Yes.
but I'm not publishing anything anymore. Simply because the moment I joined Upbound, I'm putting all Crossplane stuff into Upbound simply because so that people don't say I'm biased or subjective or something like that, right? So those are the places, right? And then anybody, this is kind of public invitation. If anybody needs any help, just ping me, and I've been saying, kind of like I always respond to any question or a invitation for a chat or something like that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the easily approachable person in the CNCF community is Victor Farsday. You just give him send him an email or just give it DM on the Twitter. He's just jump into it. So learning about Crossplane is a go-to resource for you if you want to learn joining it. So we talk about like I will see we have AWS, GCP, Azure. These are the provider. When I go to the repository, we see all the providers in it. And right now, I see the Civo is also on the market. We see a lot of the attraction in the Civo cloud. And I think more and more coming up. Like currently, do you remember what is currently the provider that is Crossplane is not targeting, is not supporting, but its scope is going to be a very global right now. A lot of provider, and because of the GitHub, this is an open source project. Even everybody can contribute to it if they are
Yeah.
not providing a doctor for that, provider for that as this moment.
Yeah, so I mean, right now, if you go to crossplane.io, you will see AWS, GCP, Azure, Alibaba, Rook, Helm, Terraform, Kubernetes, SQL, GitLab, Equinix Metal, DigitalOcean. What else is there? Civo, IBM Cloud, Argo CD, Styra, and Cloudflare. And that's only a part of it because, as you said, it's open source. Those are the providers that we have on Crossplane IO. But then on top of that, there is potentially any number of providers because people just contribute. It's in their repositories. You might need to Google a bit. So the list is probably 2-3 times bigger, right? And kind of the contributions that we are seeing and the involvement of people is just absolutely amazing, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's a power of open source. Like you just remember that it's not is in the list. You can start contributing to it, and you'd see tomorrow that is already available on the GitHub repository, and your provider is on the part of it. So that is really and before I think during the conversation you draw some point of the composition. Like you tell me when we talk about previously, like there's a composition exists, and we talk about it the shift left a lot. Like things already created. It's not just a Jira ticket anymore, but the composition part of it. Because if somebody is really new to the Crossplane and haven't heard about the composition yet, just shed some more light on it, how it's really useful for that. I think it's a wonderful, you create a separation of concern. We talk about it, that the operator create the cluster for you, and it's for the developer who want to use these services and that infrastructure. So kind of a separation of concern. Everybody know what part they try to do. So just people who are really new to the composition or
So,
Crossplane, just think about.
when you say separation of concerns, for many people, what that means is I do this and you do that. And when you need something that I do, you need to call me. And then I'll do it for you, right? And that does not really work, especially at scale. The whole idea about shift left. Now, let me actually stop here for a second. Many people misunderstand what shift left is. For in some companies, when you say shift left is, hey, we are going to give everybody AWS account, and we're going to give everybody access to Kubernetes, and we're going to give everybody account in Datadog, and kind of like everybody gets everything. And that does not work because I cannot know everything. You cannot know everything. Nobody can know everything. There is no such thing as a person that knows absolutely everything. That's not how shift left works. How shift left does work successfully is everybody creating a service that somebody else can consume. You can think of it like if you're an operator, the entity that is shifting left for you is AWS, right? When you go to AWS, you do not go and open a Gmail and say, dear AWS, can I get a VM? No, they created a service. You go there, you click a button, you get VM, or you execute some command, or you do. There are many, many different ways how you get stuff, but you get stuff yourself. You do not request people to do it for you. What we're trying to do, and what other companies are trying to do, is to shift left internally, right? Not only from external services. So, yes, if you're specialized in something, in Kubernetes, or in cloud, or in AWS, or in Azure, or in this or that, you should create services that help people consume your knowledge. Let's put it this way, right? Kind of like convert what you have in your head into something that others can use. Just like if you think about, if you're a front-end developer, your customer is a user of that application. But if you're an operator, then your customer is a developer, right? That's the left side of you, or this is left. So you're creating services that others can consume instead of reacting to their requests. Kind of, oh, something is not working, fix it for me. No, you can fix it yourself. I just made it easy for you to do it yourself. It's about being self-sufficient. I can show. Shall I show a demo? How it works?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Why not?
Yeah. Okay. Let's share the screen. I'm not prepared, so I will be half. I will be partly, how do you call it, improvising. But that's all the fun, right? So where am I? Let me see. Let me organize myself just for a second. Okay. Cool. No, this is what I want to show, right? You see my black screen, like terminal, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let's start with something easy. Let's say that, what should I do? Oh, okay. Let's say that I want to create something very, very simple, and then we're going to complicate things later. Let's say that I want to create, let me find one example, virtual machine in, let's say, DigitalOcean. I like DigitalOcean, right? Now, how would I do that? And now this is not composition. This is the lowest level of Crossplane, right? If I would want to create and manage a virtual machine in DigitalOcean, I would have a cluster. I already have a cluster with Crossplane and DigitalOcean provider, right? And then I would define something like this. Hey, I want, this is a Kubernetes resource kind is droplet. That's how virtual machines are called in DigitalOcean. And I'm going to say I want it in New York City. This should be the size. And I want the virtual machine based on Ubuntu, right? And then for me to get that, I can just say, hey, I want to apply. Just like as if you're deploying an application in Kubernetes, right? A deployment or ingress or something. And you say, hey, this is the file. There you go, right? And come on, there we go. Now this resource is created in my management Kubernetes cluster, that control plane of control planes. And now it is Crossplane's job to figure out what to do with it. It is probably speaking now, chatting over the phone with DigitalOcean API and figuring out what to do. And as a result, if I do kubectl get droplets, let's say managed all the resources. Now this will take a second or two because there are potentially many. You can see that right now in my cluster, I have only one thing. That's that virtual machine that is being created. So now Crossplane is doing the work, figuring out what to do and how to do it. So that's and like that, I have resources for almost everything. I could create basically anything in DigitalOcean or AWS or wherever. Now you might say, okay, that's very simple, that's easy. That's not about shift left that I was explaining before. Let me show you a bit more complicated example. Let's say that I'm a developer and I want to create a cluster, EKS cluster in AWS. Now, if I would like to do that myself, I would need to, do all the things that I mentioned before to create EKS cluster, node group, subnets, VPCs, internet gateways, all that stuff. But I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is, here we go. I'm going to define this, something called cluster claim. Now, this does not exist in Crossplane. Crossplane did not create this. Somebody else created that in my company. Somebody else who understands how to manage Kubernetes clusters in AWS created what we call composition, right? And now I, as a user, as a developer, I need to specify a file similar to this. And here I'm saying, hey, I would like to have a cluster in AWS and it should be EKS. And that would be one of many potential implementations of that composition, because whomever is SRE in my company or expert in AWS or Kubernetes or whatsoever could have created implementation in other providers like Azure, for example, or Equinix Metal or whatever. And then I need to specify some parameters, some fields. And those are the fields that I, as a developer and operator or SRE or sysadmin agreed, right? This is how I'm consuming the service created by that person, right? And here I'm saying I want a medium-sized nodes. I don't know what medium is. I want it to be bigger than small, smaller than large, right? And I want to have at least 3 nodes because there is cluster autoscaler. So how would I do that? Again, very simple, right? I'm going to say namespace is going to be a team because let's say that I'm a member of the team called a team. And I want to apply, and that something is defined here. Now, in real life situation, I would probably not be executing these commands. I would probably be pushing this to Git, and then Argo CD or Flux would synchronize and all that jazz. But for now, I'm going to do it manually. And then you can see that my cluster claim was created. And if I list the cluster claims, namespace a team, right? Get cluster claims, you can see that now something is happening for 14 seconds already, right? It is not yet ready. Now it is working because it takes like 20 minutes or 30 minutes to do everything in AWS, but that's not my problem anymore. So as a developer, as somebody who consumes the service of that, let's say SRE, my job is done. I'm finished. And now it is Crossplane figuring out what to do and how to do it and so on and so forth. And just to give you an idea how many things actually need to happen from this very, very simple example, I can do again kubectl get managed. And Come on. 1, 2, 3, go. Right? Those are all the things that were created from that simple definition. I got role policy attachments, roles, some objects, meaning that not only that I will get cluster, but whomever designed this service is going to also install some applications, some Kubernetes resources in that cluster, so that cluster is not only a cluster, but it is a cluster that is ready for me to use. When that cluster is ready, I will get some Helm charts over there applied. I will get a node group, a cluster, a VPC, internet gateway, route table, security groups, subnets, what else? And that's about it, right? So all those things I would have to do myself, and that would take a lot of time. But instead of doing it myself, somebody created a composition which acts as a service that I can consume, and all I had to do is to use to invoke that, to use the custom resource or composite resource definition that that person defined. And then now this will take a while, right, to be done, because it takes around 30 minutes in AWS. But let me show you now. So now this was all from developer perspective. When I say developer, it could be anybody, really, not necessarily only developer. Very easy because somebody created a service. Now, the way how I created that service, the other me, the SRE me, is there are two important things that I had to do in advance to enable somebody to be able to manage clusters and VMs and what's not. And that's a definition and implementation of that definition. So definition could be this, right? Saying, hey, I want to create something completely new in Kubernetes. Nobody thought of that before, and that something is going to be called composite cluster or cluster claim. And I'm going to define an API schema that will say, hey, whomever wants to create and manage clusters, all they have to do is specify an ID and parameters are version, node size, and min node count. So this is me designing that service. And then once you design the service, the schema of that service, or the custom resource definition of that service, actually this is not custom resource definition. Crossplane converts that schema into custom resource definition with its own controller and everything it needed. But then I can create implementations of that something, and this would be example in EKS, in AWS. Here I'm implementing, I'm saying, hey, whenever somebody wants to create something called, composite cluster, and when somebody provides these labels, because I have many implementations, then Crossplane should create a cluster, it should create a node group, and it should create some roles, and so on and so forth. A lot of things. So this is complex, but I'm actually, I'm dealing with all that complexity myself as the author, as the designer of that service, and not the consumers, right? And then similarly, and I'm almost done here. I don't want to go too far because I like conversations rather than demos. Let's say that when that cluster is created, that you would like to create a backend application with a database, let's say RDS database, right? Again, that would be complicated, right? Because for application, you would need a deployment service, ingress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For the database, you would need RDS database, a subnet. You would probably need to configure some users, and so on and so forth. So I have yet another custom resource definition here, or custom resource based on custom resource definition. And let me see, which one should I use today? Let's do this one. I like this one. And here I would be saying, hey, I don't know about all those things. What I'm going to create, what I'm going to consume is something that somebody created in my company called APP claim. And I'm going to say, I wanted backend application with the database. And I want it to be local, right? Those are the labels that can be anything, right? Depends on the designer of that XRD. And I'm going to specify a few things like this is the image and this is the host. And then I want the database. And I'm going to choose AWS with Postgres. Again, it could be AWS with MySQL or whatever the implementations are. I'm going to set the version, the size of the nodes, and that's about it, right? And then if I would apply this to the cluster, kubectl apply or push it to Git and use Argo CD or Flux or whatever you're using, I would get that application running in the cluster that is being created right now. That was the shortest possible, quickest possible demo ever.
No, but it works wonderful. I think it's tell the whole story that we talk about today. Like I think one thing I really try to understand is in the Crossplane we have come to source definition that you convert into the CRDs. That the Kubernetes you need extra features. If you need extra feature in Kubernetes, you need CRDs, the custom rulers, all these stuff. So in the Crossplane, we have composite resource definition that behind the scene convert into the CRDs and do the heavy lifting for you.
Correct. That's part of Kubernetes design, very early design. To Kubernetes is supposed to be extensible, right? And that's what we are doing. We are allowing you to extend Kubernetes. So it's not me extending Kubernetes. I let you extend your own Kubernetes in a very easy way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and I think on the what I have noticed, I see a lot of this pattern all like in the CSI, CRI. Like somebody created, like when we create the storage in the Kubernetes, somebody create the storage and you claim it. And it went for you.
Sorry, I lost you there. I think that I'm losing connection.
Yes.
You were mentioning storage. Somebody claimed
Yes.
it, creates a storage and you claim it.
Yes. Yes, I tell us about this. This is a pattern in the Kubernetes in all of the places. Like in the CNI, CSI, CRI, they're all having the same pattern. Like somebody create the implementation, and you create the interface, and somebody create implementation.
Exactly.
It's almost plain as well. Like
it's essentially the same as the story you said about storage, right? You go to a provider that gives you storage, and that provider creates CNIs for you, extends your Kubernetes so that you can claim that storage. The major difference is that it's not a vendor in our case who creates equivalent to storage. It is you instead of giving you equivalent to storage so that somebody can claim it, we're giving you tools to create the same mechanism to extend Kubernetes so that the rest of the people in your company can claim your services, your custom resource to create resources based on custom resource definitions that you created, and operators and control loops and all the stuff.
Yes, absolutely, and absolutely. And I think during the demo we see like is the Crossplane. When I look at the definition, like we talk about, you created the application, services, and infrastructure, all residing in the same tool. Like previously, when we create something in infrastructure, we use the Terraform, and when we need to apply apps on top of it, we use another tool. So for the infrastructure management, we use this tool. For the application deployment, we, and I think that's we're talking about. Like in the Kubernetes world, there is so many options to doing same things. Like in the policy engine, you have Kyverno and OPA. When you use GitOps, you have Flux and Argo CD. So I think living in the Kubernetes world is people tell like give you the extra edge. Like you can do so many things with it. And outside of the Kubernetes, you have kind of yourself limited to it. Like, I think that is a big selling point. We talk, if people are listening to us today and watching the session in the Crossplane, like we are on the Kubernetes side of things, so you have a full liberty to do the extra things by yourself.
So that is precisely the one of the biggest advantages. Or, if you choose a tool, let's say Terraform or Pulumi or Ansible, right? They're all great tools. So nothing negative about them. But the problem is that they need to build their own ecosystems, right? So whatever you need working with those tools together, usually the communities around those tools need to figure it out. Hey, how am I going to ship logs from this tool? Well, I don't know. Maybe there is a way. Maybe there isn't. What makes Kubernetes special is that the ecosystem is the biggest ecosystem there ever was in the world, right? So we have a lot of different projects, providers, tools that all work together. So whatever is Kubernetes native should work with any other tool that is Kubernetes native. It doesn't have to be like, if you use Crossplane, you do not need to go to Crossplane community and ask, hey, how should I collect logs from what Crossplane does? You don't have to do that, because you can just use any of the log shipping tool that is cloud native, Kubernetes native, and so on and so forth. And the same thing goes for monitoring, for policy management, and so on and so forth, right? So there is a huge advantage of being part of and collaborating with the whole ecosystem, right? So that's something that never happened before. I don't remember ever seeing in the past, and I've been in this industry for like 35 years, kind of a long, right? We never had such a huge ecosystem, such a huge community where everything works together, right? Never. And it's absolutely amazing, right? And it's very helpful, because, so imagine that you are if you're a contributor to one of the projects and you want to make the project great, you don't have to do everything yourself, right? You don't have to say, oh, for my project I need to implement logging. You don't have to, because you're part of the ecosystem. You're part of a big machine, and we all work together kind of somehow.
I'm totally agree with what you just said. That I knew, like, I'm not a kind of a decade-old person, but I have 5 to 6 years. Like, when you use in the Microsoft Word or the .NET or the Java Word, there are some of the things I can't able to do that myself. But as you mentioned, the Kubernetes, its ecosystem is growing, and it's a very shortest amount of time, like 2014, 6 years of Kubernetes. And the way you have Kubernetes dashboard, you have policy engine, the storage providers, the network providers, the Kubernetes container engines, container time, the GitOps tool. I think there is even a very small portion that is like tools like kubectl, kubenx, very small things, but do a very heavy work for you. So I think we never seen, I don't know what we hope to see these kind of example of the past, but it's a community that is huge. That's give you the so many options of doing the same thing, doing things in a very proficient manner. Like if you want to do it, use it on this particular tool or this platform. And before I let you know,
Exactly.
Victor, I love talking. I don't want to end this conversation, but we have a limited time always when we talk about it. So let us know what is currently happening in the Crossplane. What are the new features that we see? What are the versions came up about the next year? And what I now take at eye out on, and why I'm excited about these new features.
So now we want to, one of the main focuses now within Crossplane and Upbound, some things are Crossplane specific, some with Upbound, is to further help SREs or DevOps people to do their job better anyway, right? So one of the things that is coming, it's already available, but we did not announce it yet much. First of all, there is a marketplace, which gives you two things. Like, you saw the composition that I created, right? So I could use those compositions internally, or I can also publish it on a marketplace so that when you want to create something, you can either use my compositions or as is, actually, or you can use it as a blueprint so that you can modify it to fit your own needs, right? So sharing, marketplace is a way to share compositions, to share what we call them packages, because all those end up being container images, and a user interface, so that, you know, the person that would be writing that YAML that I showed can go to the marketplace, say, hey, I would like Victor's composition, or I would like my own composition to use it, but I don't have the documentation. So you will see in the market, actually you can already see in the marketplace, you know, documentation for every field, what you should put, where should you put, how should you consume that something. That's one thing. The other thing is some kind of visual interface that will help you write those both compositions and those claims, right? So that you can go to an interface and say, hey, so I would like that cluster that Victor was created, go there, fill in a couple of fields, and then either apply directly in a cluster or output it to YAML that you can just, you know, kind of, you get YAML and then you can do with it whatever you want. You can push it to Git, you can apply it directly, and so on and so forth. And what else? I mean, there are a lot of things, and I'm never sure which of the things we're cooking are public or not. So I'm never sure what I can share or I cannot share, man. Let me think. Yeah, the rest is risky to share. I'm not sure whether it's public yet. But great things are coming. I promise you that. This is going to be a very exciting year.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing I really noticed, like when when I run some demos, I see some of the composition, and I'm thinking about, we can already composition available for me? I can use them and do the work for myself. Like in the same thing, we talk about in the Kyverno, there is a library for you to use already, the build policies. You can use it by Kyverno. And same for the composition as well. Like somebody wrote it, you go to the marketplace. So that is a good news actually for me. And
yeah,
now you're
so
sharing something, I guess.
so this is early, right? This is preview, so this is not how it will look like. Very early look, but if I search for myself, so you can here see some featured providers, featured compositions. Those are configurations, actually. Those are created by others, like platform reference for Azure, for GCP and stuff like that. But let me search for my own, the things that I uploaded, right? I did not make it pretty, but here's, let's say, the Kubernetes cluster that I created, right? If you would like to know how to do it, you can here see that there is one XRD, and there are 5 compositions. So you can see that here I have implementation for Azure, for Civo, DigitalOcean, AWS, Google. You can see the details of all those, right? A lot of things. But what is more useful is that you can see here the composite cluster that I created, and you can get, so if you're not sure how to create this YAML, you have here auto-generated documentation, and you can see that, okay, so you can specify minimum number of nodes, it is not required, the size of the nodes, that is required, right? So so you can consume my or anybody's compositions, and you get a documentation about how to compose them yourself, how to claim them. And soon, very soon, there will be a way to convert this, you know, to fill in some fields and convert this into YAML and just say, hey, there we go. I use Victor's composition to create a cluster or whatever else from whomever else. So it's about sharing, really, and creating documentation and helping.
Yes, absolutely. I think I really like this is a big for me. I really like this approach. And I think everybody who listening to us who go to the when this is available. This is a go
Yeah, if you
this
go
is
to
going to be a very
marketplace.crossplane.co,
exciting feature for
yeah,
use a vector composition. And I want to use a vector composition because he is expert in the crossplane and I am not. I definitely want to use
I mean,
vector composition.
you know,
Absolutely.
one thing you can do is use the composition that somebody else created, me or anybody else, right? But what is even more helpful, I think, is to, so instead of, if you start creating compositions yourself, instead of starting from scratch, maybe you say, hey, actually, let me take a look. Oh, this is doing 80% of what I need, right? Then you can take it and then modify it. Instead of starting from scratch, modify it to be exactly what you want, right? So some people will use it as is, but other people will use it as a starting base to create their own compositions that do whatever they wanted to do.
Yes, absolutely. We can give the analogy like when you create the Angular project, there are some boilerplate code for already you available, and then you write some code on top of it. So you can take that analogy. It's kind of a boilerplate, and the things that you needed, you can never write those kind of things. So I think that this
Exactly.
approach is look, but it's really wonderful. I see a lot of a lot of love for this feature, absolutely. And before I
Because,
let you go, we have just 5 6.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, so we have just 6 7 minutes more. So we just wrap up the discussion here. Like I think if we go to the Crossplane as of today, and when I look at the AWS provider, there are services I see RDS instance, Kinesis, or database, or EC2, or Flump, everything. So do in the Crossplane, we can do anything in this AWS, or there are some limits that the thing you can create with the Crossplane, like some services, because AWS is always being updated with the new services. So in the future
So,
we see all.
I mean, there should be all everything in the big three in AWS, Azure, and GCP. If you use the Jet provider, you should have 100% or close to 100% coverage. Now, I cannot guarantee that maybe 3 hours ago AWS made something new and then it will be available shortly after, right? But if it's not 100%, it's very, very close.
That's a great good news. That's a good news. Like we see in the cloud provider, there are always things coming up, some feature deprecated, some coming up, like Azure Container App is go GA. This I think in the MS build they announced it. So people think about, like, if we use Crossplane, is everything is in there, or it's some partly, or 90% or 100%?
I mean, I cannot guarantee everything, right? It's impossible to say because maybe yesterday Bill Gates decided to create a new service in Azure. Oh, I mean, it's not Bill Gates anymore. Anyways, so close to 100%. Maybe we are few days delayed.
Yes, absolutely. But I think for the listener or watching this, that's a good news. Like we're closing on for these big three cloud provider.
But here's now the important thing, right? Everything I showed, so I did not show today, I did not do any marketing for outbound, commercial, and any of those things, right? Everything I showed and we spoke about is free open source. So if something is missing, what should you do? Well, contribute. Contribute. Kind of that's the spirit. That's the whole idea is that we all work together, helping each other, right? That's the spirit of open source. So if there is something missing, make a pull request.
Yes, absolutely. And the future is one pull request away from you. You just call it.
Exactly.
Because I see it, I see when the Kubernetes, I see the Crossplane is the same as a Kubernetes. There are some, when Kubernetes first started, there is not many features available. But as the list goes on and people take interest in it, is everything available. So I look at the Crossplane the same self. Like we have so many cloud experts available, and they see some of the things is not there. Now it's free repository to be contribute. So go ahead
Exactly.
and start contributing it to the Crossplane IO. And if
And
you
you know,
don't, yes,
it's very I think that everybody in Crossplane, if you go to Slack or something, we are doing our best to be very welcoming. So just come and say hello.
yes, absolutely. And one of the person that I know is always welcoming is Victor. You can talk to him in anywhere, like in the Twitter, on the LinkedIn or the Slack channel, or anywhere. You just ping him. He's a wonderful, one of the easily approachable person for you. And if you need help with the Crossplane, he's a person for you. And go to the DevOps toolkit. Why not? You should go to the DevOps
Yeah,
toolkit. There are ton of videos available, and you learn, and then start contributing to the Crossplane. As easy as it is. Learn, contribute, learn, contribute. So
exactly.
thank you. Absolutely. So thank you, Victor. It's been a wonderful. I don't try to end the conversation when I joined you, but it's been a, we have a limited time as ever, but it's a wonderful conversation. And you tell us some of the new exciting things coming up, and that's make my interest a bit more. I try to learn more about it, the crossplane in itself as well. So thank you everyone who joined us on the live stream, and you can watch it afterward as well. So hope to see you again in the future. And go to the DevOps Toolkit channel, start contributing to the crossplane.io, github.com/crossplane, and tell us what are the feature you like about most, and tell us what you want to learn more about Crossplane. We hope to cover again in the future webinar. Thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye bye, everyone. Thanks, Victor.